Phyllis unlocked her driver's door and got in. Her late model Chrysler had power locks, and so Carol's door unlocked at the same time, and the two of them were in. Tony pulled out from the curb slowly, and the Cadillac's bulbous nose led the two-car caravan down North Rendon to Grand Route St. John and Esplanade, where it made a right and headed roughly south-southwest toward the court. The Cadillac had no feel for the road at all. It not only floated, but it floated tall. The nose rode high in the air, and the road was invisible save for what you could see 100 feet in front of the car. The seats were comfortable but bouncy. The seatbelts were quite obviously essential, not only in the event of a collision, but just as much to keep a lighter person from bouncing out of the car. Bumps and potholes caused a smooth springboard effect, the car's generous shocks and padded seats at first absorbing the energy, but then releasing it with equal vigor in the opposite direction. Every action has a reaction. Stoic and secure at the wheel, Tony seemed not to notice this, his more substantial bulk allowing him a lower, steadier ride. All the way down Esplanade, past Broad, past Claiborne, past Rampart. At Dauphine, Tony turned right into the quarter, and Phyllis followed two cars behind. Heading down Dauphine Street, like heading down Royal or Decatur, gives the French Quarter visitor a serene, detached view of the lighted office buildings and hotel high-rises of the CBD, especially at night when the low-slung quaintness of the quarter is at its darkest and most removed, especially on its quieter eastern side, its more residential side, with just the occasional watering hole like Harry's, bars that seem to attract no tourists, only regulars. Tony turned south on Rue St. Anne, crossed Bourbon and Royal, and took a left on Charters heading east again. He passed Harry's at the corner of Dumaine and continued down past St. Philip. He took a left on Governor Nichols and found a parking space by the Little French Bakery. Phyllis and Carol had split off soon after entering the quarter. To enter the quarter in a quiet section and take the first good spot you come across is a smart move, though Tony hadn't done too badly, leaving only a 2-block walk from Charters to Harry's corner. At Harry's, we grabbed the round table by the window just inside the door. Phyllis and Carol arrived 2 minutes later. "Sorry, fellas," said Phyllis. "I wanted to get some cash." "Where'd you guys park?" Tony asked, once Phyllis and Carol were both seated. "We got lucky. I took a chance on St. Philip, and there was a space across from the school." Tony stood up and took orders. "Beer, beer, Chardonnay, beer." "I'll get a pitcher and a glass of..." "Forget it," Carol changed her mind. "I'll just have a beer." "Okay," Tony agreed enthusiastically. "Coming right up." He stepped to the bar while Phyllis and Carol pulled themselves closer to the table. Harry's was relatively empty. All but one of the stools at the bar were taken, but none of the 5 or 6 tables. A drinker's bar, not so much a chatter's bar. Unless you have something you feel you need to talk to Harry about. The TV in the far upper corner behind the bar was on a hockey game, an early Stanley Cup playoff game, with the sound on but not loud. The jukebox at the far end of the room was dark and untouched. "Was that the mayor I saw driving your car a little while ago?" one of the guys at the bar asked Tony, while Tony's pitcher was being poured. Tony smiled at the guy and told him to mind his own business, which he did, not saying another word to Tony, and looking back up to the television. "So, Michael, sweetheart," started Carol, "have you ever dated an older woman before?" A terrible question, I thought, so unsubtle. A question Phyllis would ask. Maybe a question Phyllis did ask. I didn't answer. Gratefully, Tony returned, pitcher in hand, talking. "We'll have one here," Tony announced, while pouring out the glasses. "Then we'll go to the sequel." "What's the sequel?" "What's the sequel?" Tony shouted dramatically, a little too dramatically, though I was glad for the interruption. "Gee whiz, Mike, you don't get out much, do you?" "Maybe I do, maybe I don't," I told Tony to be difficult. "So what's the sequel?" I repeated myself. "Oh, just the single best low-life dive bar next to Harry's in the whole city," said Tony with a touch of irony. "I see," I told him. Then Phyllis relieved some pressure and followed the new tack. "The sequel is just a place we used to go because the beers were cheap and they've got a pool table." "Yeah, let's play some pool tonight," Carol added excitedly. "Doubles." Tony sat down and raised his glass to toast. "Here's to the old days." "And new friends," toasted Phyllis. "And new friends," Tony repeated dutifully. "Cheers." "Cheers," said Carol. "Cheers." "So what were you guys talking about?" Tony asked after gulping a third of his beer. "Oh, we asked Michael whether he's ever dated an older woman before." "I think I can safely say I have now," I answered quickly, doing my best to stay on top of things. Phyllis laughed and made it clear she liked my answer. I gave it the green light. If we wanted to, for better or for worse, we could call the day, and now the night, a date. Though Tony and Carol's conception did make it a little harder for me to imagine going to bed with Phyllis. Sex is for future parents on this fine spring day, not for opportunistic assholes. Maybe we'd call it a date if we had to, but we'd keep it nice and light. Our small party stayed at Harry's for an hour, but for the most part we didn't talk very much. It was a comfortable downtime. Tony watched the hockey game. Phyllis and Carol occasionally murmured to each other. When the pitcher was nearly empty, Carol broke the spell by pouring the last inch of beer into Phyllis's glass and stood up. Phyllis obligingly gulped it, then followed Carol to her feet. "Let's do it," said Phyllis. "Let's go play pool." "Sounds good to me," I agreed. But Tony was slow to catch on. When the three of us were standing, Carol touched Tony's shoulder and encouraged him with a squeeze to finish his beer. He did so quickly and stood, but not without a wince of frustration as he reluctantly released himself from the hockey game. The sequel, today called Something Else, brought a second wind. Paired off at the pool table, a touch of new exuberance kicked in, as a pool table presents so many opportunities to show off your swagger and your ability to strike a pose. The women leaned seductively against the rails, whether they knew they were doing it or not, and also against the wall with the overlapping beer posters in the darkroom. Everyone took turns, though the men took their turns much more seriously. Tony had big man balance and he showed it off well. Rather than lean into the rail while steadying his hands to line up a shot, Tony kept all his weight balanced over his feet and put only enough pressure on the table as was necessary to guide his cue. Tony was the better player. He seemed to miss only his absurd shots, and even those he didn't miss by very much. You can always evaluate a player by his misses as well as his hits. He played to challenge himself. Admirable. He also missed on purpose occasionally to keep the ladies at the table. Carol was proficient, Phyllis was terrible. The team of Tony and Carol beat the team of Phyllis and Michael in 3 straight games, and after the third, the latter called it quits. The sequel was busier than Harry's had been, but still desolate compared to the higher levels of activity elsewhere in the court. From bottles this time, we drank 2 beers apiece. Tony possibly 3 or 4. Carol possibly just 1. The conversation at the sequel was limited to pool strategy, except for when Carol went to the jukebox to browse. "Well, what do you guys want to hear?" she said, exasperated, after Tony suggested she just pick something. "Oh, I know," she said, spotting something. "It must have been the right place. Must have been the wrong time," so on and so forth. When the song was over, another Dr. John song started, but we played the 3rd miserable game by then, and with the pool thirst quenched, it was time to move on.